basically this data exists in electronic format. So for us to convert that and realize the challenge that we have is basically within the realms of WRFM, which is Wells Reservoir and Facility Management. And analyzing that is basically analyzing the WRFM digital transformation value chain. How does it start? You start with digitization, with integration, analytics, and democratization. What's happening in the industry? You will have technology already. OCR technology exists in the past a long time ago, where you're able to scan, more or less pick up those reports in structured format, scan them, and get the data. We also have log data. We have top structure map. I'm a petroleum engineer, so I'll speak from the perspective of
no problem. I think hopefully most people can
engineer. So
can connect to
you look at that. So we're already using technology exists already in the industry where you can digitize this data using machine learning. You build a deep neural network to be able to train the data to understand how to do that. We're already doing that using top structure map can be digitized, contours can be digitized, because if these data are not digitized, you cannot actually move in the digital transformation train.
Sorry to butt in, but are we already seeing some operators doing that? Because the impression I get is that this is something that has to happen on a, if you like, company by company basis. No one in the industry is perhaps doing this for the industry. So can you just speak to the extent to which this is already happening?
Yes, it's happening in, I have like case studies of 5-7 companies that it's already happening.
And how difficult is it?
Really, it's actually data. We have the inconsistency in the data, 40 years of data. Somebody has to do that job, because if that has to be done, you need to train that information. We've not gotten to that level of training. Most of them have to be done manually. And we've done that. We know a company that exists in Nigeria. They did intervention, 2-3 intervention, and they failed. They lost over $4 million for that intervention. And top management gave them the mandate that you need to do something. So they were challenged to digitize their information. So they digitized over 150 wells across the WFM value chain. So it's happening already in Nigeria.
What is the benefits? What is the incentive for people to begin to do this? Clearly, we've heard a lot from Mr. Ojulari about, you know, the efficiency gains that you can get. But sometimes I get the sense that it's difficult for people to understand this and to put in make the investments that needs to happen. So can you just speak to, from your experience, practically, what have been the gains from these efforts?
The gains is basically cheaper operations and sometimes safer operations. The realm will exist.
How much cheaper? Sorry, how much safer? If you can just help us appreciate it better.
It will be difficult for me to quantify safer in terms of number, but cheaper I can quantify that in terms of number. For you to do 3-4 interventions and lost $3 million, and then you spend probably the digital technology that exists, you spend maybe a license of that is about $100,000-$200,000. And you integrate your data that will cost you probably $15,000 per well. And because of $15,000 investment per well, you are saving over $1 million you are actually lost as a result of misdiagnosis. So it's already creating impact in these companies.
So is it safe to say that given the investments that need to be made by many companies, like as you mentioned, we have well over 40 years of data to digitize, if you like, in many cases, that has to be, if you like, built into I don't know if I can use the phrase capex of the business. You know, to what extent must we put in a budget for the cost of digitization?
I think it's more of an OPEX.
Okay, OPEX, more like
basically,
sorry, not OPEX.
Yes, basically what you do day to day. And this is done manually, tedious, repetitive. So once you leverage technology, and the technology exists already, we have one that we built in Nigeria. It's still first of its kind in the industry globally, because we actually use the principle of interpretation to get that done. We've deployed it in Nigeria. We're already discussing with companies outside Nigeria who are actually interested in getting the technology. So it's happening, and it's something that can be done.
All right, great stuff. Thank you so much for that. Useful insights. Yes, please, we can put our hands together for him. I think we're learning quite a bit in this panel. Mr. Iwerigi, I want you to also chime in here. The gas space, can you just speak to your experience at your company and the relevance of this whole conversation about digitization and AI?
Thank you very much, Wale. I think for us, I mean, we are part of the oil and gas industry, so we are part of the group where you look at this industry trends. The oil and gas industry is slightly behind the rest of industry in terms of deployment of digital innovation. In some aspects, I must say, because I think it's a little bit slightly an unfair accusation because if you look at the upstream space, a lot of the investment that was made a decade and a half ago in well technology has actually driven a lot of what we've seen in other industries. But unfortunately, the oil and gas industry doesn't always get the credit for doing that. But when it comes to the midstream and downstream areas, what we've seen as the plants that have been built over the last 20 years have the base technology for data collection. So they're sensorized plants. If you look at any plant that was built after the 1970s, you moved away from pneumatic sensors to electronic sensors. So the data was there. I think what we saw that was missing was the philosophy or approach to using data. So when I joined the industry 20 years ago, it was enough for you to be able to understand how to use simple software like Microsoft Word, Excel, Access. That was the height of what the skills were required. And our understanding of data was data we created on our desktop and reports that we created for different users. But we started to recognize that looking at some of the disruptions happening in other industries, as well as looking at some of our competitors that were in the oil and gas space that were really finding additional value in their value chain, the digital and a data-centric way of working. I think that's the key thing for us. A data-centric way of working was key to exploit the value we had internally.
So, sorry to butt in. So, are you more or less telling us that, unlike perhaps those who have been operating for the last 40 years, given the way your business was constructed initially, it sort of gives you an edge to adopt this digitization strategy moving forward?
I wouldn't say so. I think, like Jeremiah said, the data has been there. I think it really was just about the appetite and the understanding of how to exploit it. So our approach really has been to look at going back to basics. I think one advantage you can see is that the oil and gas industry, even globally, we're not too far behind. And the journey is pretty much just starting on this wave. So our view was that rather than rush into buying a lot of new technology, investing very heavily on platforms and infrastructure, was about understanding data. There are lots of terms. I think Jabarish had a wonderful slide about what AI is. Even within that phrase itself, there's so much hidden in that. And we've spent the last 2 or 3 years just trying to understand what AI is, what machine learning is, the different types of roles that are emerging in the industry, what those skill sets are like. I think one of the opportunities we also saw was that in lots of our traditional careers, accounting, logistics, engineering, they're very numerical. And the data-centric way of working is also quite numerical. So we see a huge opportunity to retool and reskill our people. Yes, there'll be people who are specialists. He mentioned a room of people who are non-engineers. I'm a bit worried about that personally because I think we miss some
picked
value.
that up as well, no doubt. So the engineers in the room need to retool.
So indeed, so we believe we started talking about the concept of the engineer of the future, and we think the engineer of the future is one that has a digital skill set as a basic tool, and that engineer is better able to understand, consume, and exploit the new technologies that are coming to create value.
Well, before I let you go, you mentioned that over the last 3 years you've been learning this whole concept of AI. What have you learned? I mean, and to what extent would you say it has changed the way you're doing business today?
So I think one of the key things we saw was that there is a different mindset when you solve problems from a digital way. So we call it the switch from analog to digital thinking. Once you start to understand the digital landscape and the tools and the techniques there, the way you approach problems is quite nuanced. It can be quite different. typically, if there was a problem on the plant, the first thing people would think about is what piece of equipment, what tool, or what manpower can we deploy. There was always something physical you had to throw at the problem to try and solve it. Now, our first thought is that let's look at the data. What's the data telling us? And we find a lot of times that, I'll give an example of something that happened in our plant. Through visualization and some simple analytics, we're able to reduce our losses by 50%.
50%.
Yes. By, again, some more sophisticated algorithm in collaboration with Shell that we did some pilots with, we're able, without any investment in process equipment,
No new investment at all.
in process equipment.
In process, okay.
Yes, of course, we had to invest in labor and some IP. Our yield, we're able to improve our yield by 3%, which in the industry,
Sounds like a
that's
lot.
huge. Yes. So when we're learning, but we're also trying to learn in a practical way, learn by doing small steps, and we're beginning to see the value. I think what is most important for us is the confidence and the insight we're getting, and it's helping us engage with the industry, with the OEMs in a more informed way, which has been a great value to us.
That's an excellent point. And I think the big takeaway from that contribution for me was the fact that there is a new confidence in the use of data. And that is really what I think you will gain when you like jump into this new ocean of data and begin to mine it, begin to use it. So it's certainly another reason why we should all adopt. All right, Mr. Yes, please, we can put our hands together for him. Thank you so much for that contribution. Now, Mr. Fafumi, many will be wondering, why are you here? You are not in the oil and gas industry. But clearly, your organization deals with data. I want you to speak to this whole point of digitization as it relates to the oil and gas industry, and to what extent what the MBS does is related to what we're talking about here.
Thank you very much. I want to first apologize that the Secretary General of the Federation, Dr. Yemi Kale, is unavoidably absent because of other assignment that he has outside the country. For MBS, you understand, National Bureau of Statistics is the National Statistics Office of the country that's supposed to warehouse all data relating to any facet of our life. And in doing that, what we are doing today, or the topic that we are discussing, is very, very important to MBS, because we are not only to store data that are just official data. So we also need to complement the official data with granular data, which are more detailed, and which we call the big data, so that people will be able to have a robust data to make decisions and to inform the public. So for MBS, digital transformation is very key to us, because we realize that data should be available on real time, more accurate, and as at when that data is needed. So, and that is why, if we continue to use the conventional way of data collection, data management, and data transmission, we would not be able to achieve that. And that is why anywhere issue of digital transformation is being discussed, we are very happy to be part of that. And we have, since the new dispensation of Dr. Yemi Kale, we've been able to transform the office into application of using digital means of our data collection and management. For example, before now, we used to do data collection via use of paper, and when we do that for 3-4 months, the data processing and data collection is still going on, and until we finish that, before we'll be able to have any other data collection exercise. And before we finish that exercise, maybe the data is obsolete. But now that we have transformed from paper into digital format, we can run data collection, 4 or 5 surveys concurrently, and within a few period, the data will be, the result of that exercise will be available. And when the key speaker was discussing about digital transformation and what it will help us to achieve, we found out that instead of taking job away from people, for MBS, it has actually created more opportunity for us to engage new skill, because before now there wasn't any position like maybe data manager, system administrator, security, data security engineer, and so on and so forth, and programmers. But through this digital transformation, we've been able to engage new skill and new people to be part of MBS. Even the issue of GIS was not there before, but now we have a GIS part employed, because in our survey, for example, on agric, so we need to use remote sensing imagery and process it to do our service. So this has been some of the what we are doing in MBS. And also, before I go on this, you know, we also compute each sector's contribution and growth on GDP. So an energy sector is one of the key sectors. So we need more data which are not available already for us now. And even when we want to get that data, we have to move from agencies to agencies before we. But through the digital transformation and blockchain and Internet of Things, so data will be able to be aggregated at like the discussion that we had before we came here. So we need to sign off the data by just one institution, so before it passes to National Bureau of Statistics, so that we have a data that is reliable, the data that the top management will not be doubting. So this is what we do in MBS.
So very useful insights into how you're operating and what you're doing. Yeah. But I think we might as well get into this conversation, because I think it's important to do that. And I was just thinking about this whole concept of self-regulation in the oil and gas industry. And I bring it up now because I think it may be relevant to this whole point of getting and gathering data. We've heard that where we've had a lot of challenges with data integrity appears to be more of commercial data. But then if we had perhaps the industry self-regulating a little more, maybe this whole issue around data, given how important it is in the future of oil and gas, could be addressed. And I mean, I'm open to anyone here to chime in on that point. Maybe starting from you, how would you like to see the industry helping you gather the data that you're looking for?
Yeah, I think the way to go is what we are doing now, to go digital. So because if I want to use an example of when we are collecting household data using paper, like I mentioned, so people can stay somewhere and be filling the form. There's nothing to check what they are submitting, but now going digital. So we have a system of monitoring where your data is being entered. We have an AI inbuilt into our data collection system, that if you are responding to a certain question or you are putting in a figure, the system will prompt you or prompt us at the headquarters that the figure that this person is, or the response that this person is putting, we should ask again, because we have some back information to check whether, for example, if we ask you how much are you spending on kerosene, and you are telling me maybe you are spending 10,000 in a week, and you are not using kerosene for maybe commercial purpose or for driving. So through the business intelligence system that is at the headquarters, it will prompt us, and we can ask that respondent that, please respond to this and get the data right, and it will be able to explain. So all this we can put in place to check the data that is coming to us. So like you said, those people that are putting those figures, if we have a system, digital system, that can check, you are bringing a ship and the ship is not existing. So are we going to?
No doubt. And I'm sure most of us here will agree that digital is the way to go. Try and collect digitally and so forth. The point I am actually coming to here is you even getting the data at all.
Yeah.
There is so much data, and I'm sure, thank God, will confirm this,
Yeah.
that you do not have
Yeah.
on the oil and gas industry. And I'm sure you know that too. So the point I'm making is the best way for the industry to make that data available, not just only to you, but of course to the broader industry
Yeah.
as well. Your perspective on that point, and that's why I brought up the point of self-regulation. Maybe the industry as on its own needs to begin to think about how they will address these issues that impact the industry as a whole.
Okay. Yeah. I mentioned something when we were discussing the other time that we, because of to solve this issue, we at the MBS try to develop a system which we call the e-statistics grid, where agencies or sectors will be connected, and that brought about the issue of data banking for each of the sector, where data available for each sector can be aggregated and warehoused before passing to MBS. So at that point, you get all your data, you sanctify the data, you clear the data, and the data will be available through a linkage to National Bureau of Statistics. So if you have that in place, not only oil sector or energy sector, the same thing happened to education, health, and transportation, and so on and so forth. So this is what we are planning, and we are proposing to government that within your sector, develop a system where your data can be warehoused and aggregated and cleared before pushing it.
You want to contribute to this?
Thank you for that.
And just before you do, sorry, I just want to remind everyone again, I have already received a couple of questions, so we'll be coming to that shortly. But just to remind you again, please use the platform to put in your questions, and we'll get to them hopefully shortly.
So I think, thank you for that contribution, and I do agree. I think one of the key things is that it's not, the issue with transparency is not a technical issue. I think the technology to do that is available. If you even look at something like blockchain, I mean, people talk about cryptocurrency when they talk about blockchain, but really the intrinsic value in that technology is the ability to have robust transactions that can be trusted. But I think we're all aware there's a huge amount of sensitivity around commercial figures in terms of sharing them, transparency. So this is more of an issue of collaboration of trust. Something that we have to work as an industry and build that confidence. If I look at one example in my company, we had a lot of issues with our gas suppliers. We have multiple gas suppliers, and there was always this challenge about, are we all being treated fairly? And why was the plant, which was central to the three suppliers, making the decisions we were making? And using very simple technology, we're able to share information with them real time, so that all suppliers can now see the gas network real time and understand. So when we're asking you to cut back, and when we're asking you to increase, or asking one person to increase, everyone sees the data that we're using to make that decision. So I think it's in these type of collaborations that we start to build that trust, and we start to build an atmosphere where the conversation for sharing the real core data that people are really interested in will come out of.
Still on this point, okay, thank God, please go ahead.
Okay, let me add to that.
If you can, very briefly, because I want to try and get into some of the questions.
Because we have national data repository that is supposed to house the whole data that we have in the oil and gas industry, sits in DPL. So as we are discussing digital transformation, I think it's a good time to discuss about digitalizing the NDR, maybe calling it National Digital Data Repository, so that all the data about the wells, sometimes you go to DPR and they don't have information about the wells, and so they're supposed to house the data. You have the same discussion with that, so it's something that the regulation exists already, but basically like Ogabayo discussed, is the leadership. Once they insist that, look, we need this data, that data can be given to them because they are the regulator. So it's something that exists already in the petroleum industry. It now depends on leadership drive to get that done.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, so let me get into one question. I'm going back to you because it's still on the point of data. It's for you, Mr. Fafumi. um, the question is, the government is the biggest owner of data, so why is our national data still so segmented? And I think perhaps the point here is that on some occasions we see different figures being bandied for data that relates to the same issue in Nigeria. So if you can just speak briefly to that point.
That's true, and that is why MBS is working on developing what we call data ecosystem for in the country, and by Statistics Act that established MBS, data that is regarded as official statistics supposed to be cleared by MBS before anybody publishes that data. So, because we know that data collection or data gathering exercise has a standard that's supposed to be followed. So, if it is census, we know what it should be followed. If it is surveys, it has a methodology that's supposed to be followed. And that data, after being cleared, supposed to be sent to MBS as the National Statistics Office, and the source for the national data supposed to be through MBS. It can also be available at those sectors, portal or their data warehouse, but it must be one figure for the country. So, and that is why I give an example of the financial sector, where we have different figure from inland revenue, different figure from CBN, different figure from accountant general and auditor general. So, and for MBS, we need to only present only one figure for the country. So what do? So we now ask them to establish what we call the Data Harmonization Committee within themselves and bring their data to the table. Who is right, who is wrong. Clear that first before you transmit it to MBS. So, and through that, they were able to harmonize the data and have just one figure that the country is speaking to, or anybody that wants to use that data. So the same thing can happen through this sector. You look at your data, you have your data harmonization committee, and iron out the data.
So what you're saying in essence is that different industries or sectors need to come together to harmonize the data that they present to you.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Fair point. Okay. There's a question here on blockchain. And I think this is for you. It says, do you currently use blockchain in your operations, and how have you applied this to project management activities, especially quality control and contract management?
Well, actually, no, we don't.
Okay.
We haven't yet started to use a lot of the very sophisticated tools. As we said, we're starting simple, we're building up. We find that a lot of the problems that we have, the low-hanging fruits, you don't actually need huge investment in very sophisticated algorithms to solve. Digital thinking is really about the way, it's a different mindset. It's the way you look at data and the way you consume data and use it. So these are things that we have in our toolkit, but we just haven't seen an application that warrants that investment.
Right.
And I think that's very important. The whole thing about using technology for an intent. You use something that's appropriate. So the reason why we haven't used it is that we have not seen a need to use it, not because we have anything.
All right, fair point. Thank God this is for you. Do you think the oil and gas or energy companies are far or lagging behind what the information technology companies have made quantum leaps already? Well, I think the point is basically, if you think the sector is lagging behind information technology companies, and why do you think that is the case?
Okay, obviously, the oil and gas industry is always maybe late adopters of technology. One of the things you find, I was discussing with somebody this morning, once you present the technology to an EMP operator, the first thing it asks you is, who is using this?
Who is using it?
Who is using the technology? You wait until company X adopts it before they will now pick it up. So we struggled that when we started. We will go around make a presentation.
But hasn't that
Yes.
culture changed
It
at
has not.
all?
The
Because
culture- the
I mean, we
culture is
hear
still-
from the likes of Shell, they are certainly adopting.
The culture is still there. Culture is still there. I actually came from the oil and gas industry. Worked under Ogabayo for about 10
No,
years.
I'm
10
sure
years.
it's
So
still there, no
it's
doubt.
Still,
But
it's still there.
the question I'm asking, aren't we seeing any change at all?
It's
Or it's really
very
slow?
It's really very slow, very slow. But it's coming up very slow. And the discussion about getting is ridiculous. If we are looking at a single version of truth, we call that in IT data democratization. So by the time you reconcile data today, and then 3 months time you meet again to reconcile data, that data has changed again. But we need to have a central system to actually democratize that data, make that data available to the right person at the right time. We're already doing that already. We have developed a chatbot where I need a production data. I don't need to call my secretary. Talk to my chatbot. Please, what is production data for this? It gives me this. What is the decline rate for this well? This technology exists already. We're already doing it in Nigeria in our company. So that's part of element of data democratization. But it will take the companies a lot of time to adopt that because they're looking at use cases of company X using it. Even if you prove that this thing can work, but they want to find out that probably without mentioning company names.
But I'm willing to bet that there would be some companies, and maybe you can lead us into this discussion around, if you like, case studies and success cases in the usage of AI and digitization. I imagine that there should be some companies out there who are thinking outside the box, who are seeing the future, who are dreaming about a new way to do this oil and gas business. Are you seeing that at all in Nigeria? And what will you say have been the experiences of those type of companies?
It exists, but it exists at people at a very lower level, and it has not gotten to the decision makers.
Right. So CEO level,
the
they
CEO
are still late
and
adapters.
they write very passionate proposals with energy, and they pass it to decision makers. It takes 2 years to fly,
and by then the technology has changed.
And then you come down, and sometimes if it flies, they actually force you to do the same thing with the same price that you gave 2 years ago. So it's a trend in the industry, and it's something that probably this forum can actually help to address.
All right. Fair point. I thought you wanted to say something about this too.
I think we've been accused now, so let me.
Yes, you have. You're on the spot now.
It is changing. I think agile ways of working is one of the key components that comes with the digital paradigm, and I think oil and gas companies also accept that. We understand that it's going to be difficult to shift. We're a massive ship with the industry. It's not difficult to turn course very quickly, but you're seeing that trust. I run a digital and innovation department in Nigeria LNG, so companies are beginning to actually put real resource behind digital. The latitude to use digital tools is improving. One of the reasons why you hear the question a lot, has it been used somewhere else? Because often when OEMs come with things, they're black boxes to the company. So you want to know if somebody else has tested that black box. And that's why you see that reticence. However, what we are saying, and we talked about the confidence that we're building, by understanding the intrinsic nature of these things, how they work, by being able to do some very simple things, but similar things ourselves, it's much easier for us now to have that conversation with OEMs, to trust and to take a chance on some of the things we do. Also, the whole concept of sandboxing, where you're not going to put something in a live environment immediately, or you're going to put it in a very small application, or in a part of the business where it's non-safety related. So you find that companies are getting a little bit more open to taking that chance. But it is something that has to grow, but I'll show you that it's coming.
All right. Related to that, and I think this is a great question, and I may have to apologize that I'm not taking all the questions. To the extent possible, I'm trying to pivot to the questions that have to deal with this topic, and more specifically about the oil and gas industry. But I think this is a good one, maybe relevant to what we've been talking about. Are there industry cases where wrong diagnosis by machines led to breakdown of major equipment in the oil and gas sector? What safeguards are there to prevent a recurrence of such faulty analysis? Now, I imagine this is one reason maybe the CEOs are a bit reticent and not early adopters.
I think the truth is we're not really using neural networks, or in terms of what people think about AI, and AI is a very broad term, like we said. where you have machines that are actually self-learning and self-thinking and developing. There are very few use cases in the industry now, I guess, that we're actually using those. I have never seen in 20 years a machine make a diagnosis that was wrong, that wasn't linked to a human being's input.
So the
I
input
haven't
was
seen
wrong.
one,
So
no.
the
But when you do go into neural networks properly, that's where you start getting exposed to that. So I think that's a risk, very real risk, but it's one still to come.
but what about the safeguards? I think that's the second question there. Bringing in safeguard, and thank God you can also chime in here.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons why we're so reticent to rush in to buy. I mean, we have companies offering us all sorts of gadgets. And if you look at the other side, the risk, everyone looks at value, but it's also the risk side. Cyber terrorism, hackers. So, and even less benign, but just as dangerous, mistakes being made by robots, mistakes being made by. I mean, there's a famous case of a self-driving car that killed someone who was walking their bicycle across a zebra crossing. Why? It hadn't been told that people would take vehicles, i.e., across. It was just looking for people walking alone, and it plowed through and killed the person. So nobody wants to be the test case for that. So that's why we're being very careful to make sure we understand what we're consuming and taking it in small bites.
So in a sense, we shouldn't blame the CEOs then. They're just being careful.
I wouldn't. I mean, the value at risk is huge.
They want somebody to be the guinea pig.
The
And then
cost
they
of a
can.
well being down, the cost of a plant being down. If you look at the value of at risk, I think it's really something we need to grow into. But one of the things I find is when we look at the value, there's value in the production, but there's also value in our cost. And I think one of the opportunities the oil and gas industry still has to exploit, and I think MD Stepco showed us very clearly, there's excellence in a lot of other industries. Now, all those industries are part of our value chain. We have caterers, logistics, medical, every single piece. So it's the value in digital for us, as we see in the LNG, is not just our production, that's key, but it's also profit in the cost. And we're also looking very aggressively on how we can take the best. We want to Uberize our fleet. We want to use wearables in medical, and we've started doing those things because that also brings a lot of value. And that's already those are things that are mature, low risk, and they're away from your production risk that you can actually use today to add value to your business.
Right. And thank God I want to hear from you on this point. But before you do, Richmond, how much? Like 10. Okay. All right, please go ahead. I think I have about 10 minutes before we have to wrap up.
Wrong diagnosis. Also looking at it from the perspective of a petroleum engineer, our job is basically to generate proposals. And if you have wrong diagnosis, maybe if you have a neural network, probably I train my neural network and it gives me a wrong diagnosis. We call some of those things go through exception-based surveillance, where the probably a neural network can just help you to generate opportunity. And before a manager can actually approve that, you also have to go through the process of verifying that. But most times, if you are able to use technology, integrate all the data, and you have a single version of truth. The problem that we have, most time, all the data we have over 40 years, they were collected in silos. We have a kind of silo mentality of working in our industry. And every discipline, the geologists will believe that he's actually the best. Without him, you won't have oil on the ground. The production technology believes that without him, you won't have the well. If we're able to use technology to integrate this data, to have a single version of truth, that's at that point in time we can leverage analytics, leverage all the technologies that we have. And when that is done, we can democratize that data, and then there's a lot of confidence in the results.
I hear you when you say that, but I'm also thinking for the CEOs, and I'm wondering, I mean, if there is a data error that will impact something that is 1 kilometer or 2 kilometers in the ocean, and fixing that could be super costly, and of course the cost of an error could be catastrophic. So if you can just speak to the middle ground, how can we, even if we're not going to adopt fully, how can we begin to, if you like, try this whole concept of adopting a digital and AI approach?
Most times, if you have the data error, technology can even help you to fix that, because we've actually worked with cases where we want to do analysis and we have missing data. So we actually have to look at existing that we have trained some network. For example, you have missing log data. I will be able to look at use neural network to actually predict where I have data I don't have. Also, some kind have log pair. So most times that the problem of missing data in our industry exists a lot. So technology can only help us. The integration, sometimes we look at missing data and they're actually discipline specific. Once you get that data integrated, you can actually have insights from other disciplines that are not available to you when you are working alone, and technology helps you to get that done.
All right.
If I
Very
was just-
quickly, because I have about 5
If I could
minutes
just
and I want to
add
get
to
to
that.
another important topic.
So your question about how do we give the CEOs confidence? The
Sure.
truth is, we're not going to retrain the GMD in digital technology at this stage of his career. So we're never going to build the amount of insight and confidence himself. The question is that who internally can he trust, that he knows has the skills, and who is on the same risk side with him. I think the challenge, especially with talking to people who are technology providers, solution providers outside companies, that they don't share risk with you.
Right.
So the stories are very sweet. The stories are very.
They're not. I mean,
yes.
there's nothing
And they may be right, but the question is that
at risk for
do
them.
you want to take that risk?
They are simply
So
selling a
having
service.
somebody internal who you know and trust, and who you know that, as you said, is on the same risk side for you, helps to make that pill easier to.
So those are the guys we need to convince.
That's my view.
Got you. No, fair point. All right, I want us to move on to another topic, which Mr. Ojolari spoke of enablers, and he spoke of forward-looking skills agenda. And I want to link this to one of the questions that we've gotten. Shouldn't companies in the industry come up with minimum basic digital training for different professionals to facilitate the digitization journey? And I wanted to hear from the panel on this point. How do we become more forward-looking in a skills agenda for the industry?
I think it was quite commendable, the initiative from SPE to actually include machine learning as part of the SPE short course, and actually co-facilitated that training with Abdurrahman. It was actually very well attended and a lot of energy in the room, and I hear a lot of people asking for this training regularly. So it's a good initiative, and it tells us
So
that
the energy and need was
energy
palpable.
in the room was powerful. We're discussing up to 5 p.m. There's still energy in the room. We just had to close because we had to run. So it shows that the guys in the industry need to acquire that skill. So once this training opportunity exists and approved at CEO level and also made as part of the training program, it's something that will help a lot.
All right. And another related question: what strategies should the oil and gas industry use to drive collaboration for digitization to secondary school or university curriculum in Nigeria? So this again is to the point of learning. You know, we spoke of engineers, the engineers 20 years ago, the engineers you need today. And Mr. Julai was speaking of the future, but I think it's now. I think those engineers, if I can use a harsh word, are becoming extinct. They've got to really retool. So your thoughts on this point, or maybe you can also chime in.
In defense of engineers who were not extinct yet.
I agree. I said it's a harsh word, I know.
So I think one of the things that gives me comfort is that although you don't see any formal interventions in terms of the educational system, I mean, Nigerians are enterprising, and our young people are there on the ball. I was with the young professionals yesterday, talking to people and asking them, what are you doing? And there was a young lady, and she said, she's in school, doing engineering. I said, are you coding? She said, yes. I said, okay, why are you doing that? She says, well, that's and I'm asking, is it just you? She said, no, everyone is doing it. So I think that gives me a lot of comfort that people understand, the young people understand that they're getting there. And indeed, you're right. Internally, we have a digital curriculum. We developed one for our staff. I said, look, in 3 to 5 years' time, we might be having a different conversation about your skill set. So here is the information you need to get up to speed. But like you said, we need to go backwards. I was talking to also a panelist yesterday in the YPE who was a STEM teacher. And STEM is one of the T aspect of that technology, is one of the key elements we really need to push in our primary schools, in our secondary schools, to make sure that we're ready for the future. We have a huge opportunity in Nigeria. I think our youth, in some maybe not so glamorous ways, have already shown us that they're very adept with technology. Yeah. It's staying our reputation today, but it shows you that the capacity is there. If we could just hold that and turn that into the right way, I think we could be seen as some other nations as a technology hub in the very near future.
No, I completely agree with you on that point, and I see the point being made about taking this education to universities. But from what I have observed, those who want to know, they find a way of learning these things on their own. All right. You want to say something? Sorry, I've left you out so much, as you can imagine.
So I just want to say that
Yes.
it's not only to the field of engineering, it's even to statistics. It's,
Sure.
Yeah. So because if you are a statistician today and you don't, you are not technologically inclined, you are as useless as being out of that service. So because before now, what they used to do that is that when they want to do sampling or want to analyze it, bring out a slide rule and this and that. But now you just need a few lines of programming, and it will do that for you. Even sample selection. So not only engineering, to other field of endeavor. So I think it's a good thing that the syllabus at the schools now should be tends toward that.
I have run out of time, but thank God I know you want to say something.
Okay,
so if you
just
can,
to add
very
to
quickly.
that it's really commendable the skill set that our young guys have. Most of the guys developing our solutions are actually Nigerians from Nigerian universities, and you see them, they come for interviews. Some of the questions that they ask, sometimes I imagine when I left school, if they give me kind of interview, I know I won't make that job, but we actually give them that, push them to the wall, and then they do that. So it's quite commendable, the skill set these guys are actually obtaining. So.
Great stuff. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, please can you put your hands together for the panel? I think we've been enlightened, we've been educated, and no doubt we've left a few things in the minds, hopefully, of the CEOs in the room. You know, you've got to let this thing happen. You've got to learn, and as I think Mr. already made the point, we've got to find a way. All of us who are bringing these new technologies and solutions to the oil and gas industry, you've got to find somebody in the organization to convince. Let that person adopt. If you can win that person's heart, then you're in. Thank you so much again.
Thank you. Just hold on for one moment. Thank you very much. Very quickly, Council Chair, please, can you join in for a group photograph? Council Chair, please. Where is Conference Chair? Is he here? Is she here? She's not here. The chair for the panel session. Chike, who is the chair? He's not here. Please come. Yeah, our president, yes. So just do a quick group photograph and that's it. Can we please give them another round of applause? Very stimulating, very incisive. And I love the fact that the last comment made by... Oh, Ogabayo, yes. Ogabayo, yeah, that's right. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Oga Michael Ludo, please. You paid for this session. All this coding business, you paid for it, eh? Get in the picture. So, paparazzi, if Exxon is not there and you snap, your balance is lost. You're not the one that paid the money. Your balance is gone. Forget it. Well, thank you, gentlemen. Thank you so much. And the members of the session and the committee that put this together. Incisive discussions, truly it has been. So lunch for VIP is served at Thai restaurant, that's our VIP lunch. Distinguished delegates, you know where your lunch is served as well. 1:30, it's when the Women Development Program in this hall will start. Did I say 1:30? That should be 1 p.m., please. 1 p.m. Women Development Program, 1 p.m. in this hall. Take care of your personal belongings, ladies and gentlemen. Please take care of your personal belongings. Please take care of your personal belongings. Please take care of your personal belongings. VIP lunch at the Thai restaurant, again, is strictly for VIPs. All other delegates, please proceed to where you had lunch yesterday. Thank you. So remember, we've spoken about our exhibitors a whole lot. So the exhibitions will be where our VIPs will start. They'll proceed to the exhibitions and then go to their VIP lunch from the exhibitions. All of the delegates are also encouraged to visit with our exhibitors. It's very important. You're encouraged to please visit with our exhibitors.